Good afternoon, ma'am. Am I audible?
You're audible, yes.
Oh,
Hello.
okay, okay, okay. Ma'am, we will begin shortly. I think 5 minutes. Okay?
Fine.
I think we have adjusted the technical issues and stuff. So yes, we'll straight go to the first plenary address of this two-day international conference. And the first plenary speaker is Professor Dr. Emma Dawson Varugis. She is an independent global cultural studies scholar specializing in post-millennial Indian literary and visual cultures. Dr. Dawson works at the intersection of world literature, visual studies, and cultural studies. Drawing on ethnographic research paradigms to conduct her fieldwork, she explores the encoding of modernity in popular cultures in the post-millennial moment. The session will be chaired by Professor Dr. Chandrobha Chakraborty. Chandrobha Chakraborty is Professor, Department of English and the Director of the Center for Studies in Gender, Culture and Media at West Bengal State University, India. Her research interests include literature of the long 18th century, colonial Bengal, gender and cultural studies. A few of her notable publications are her monograph, Gendering the Nation, Identity Politics and the English Stage of the Long 18th Century, and edited volume, The New Woman in Tagore, The Making and Unmaking of Female Subjectivity. The King in Rabindranath Tagore's drama, Political Power Reinscribed in Raja in the Politics and Reception of Rabindranath Tagore's drama. Babu Culture, the garden and garden house in colonial Bengal, Connecting Hemispheres, Playing with the Distance, Ram Mohan Roy, and Indian Transnationalist. Her latest publication in collaboration with Dr. Sneha Kaur Choudhury is published by Routledge UK in October 2025, titled Centering Women in Bollywood Biopics, Empowerment and Agency in Contemporary Indian Cinema. Before we start the plenary address, we would like to felicitate Dr. Chakraborty. I would like to call Dr. Obin Chakraborty, Assistant Professor and Head of the Department of English, Shalboni College, and the Editor of Post-Colonial Intervention to come up on stage and felicitate ma'am. Can we have a big round of applause?
Good afternoon and welcome, Professor Emma Dawson Varugez, who will be speaking today on future placemaking and belonging, rupture, communal peace and individuality in selection of post-millennial Indian speculative fiction in English. So over to Professor Varugez. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Chakrabarty, and my warm congratulations to you. My thanks also to Dr. Abin, who invited me to give this plenary. I don't know if it's possible for me to say see you all. At the moment, I'm just looking at the podium, so I don't know. It would be nice to be able to see the room, if that's possible. Is it possible to put the camera like on the room so that I can see the delegates? Would that be possible? Not on myself, but on the participants? Right. Okay, then I'll begin. I also have some PowerPoint slides, which I'm hoping you will be able to show.
Is it all right, ma'am? Hello?
Are you able to see the slides?
Yeah, can you just see the PPT?
It's a little far off, but I think it's there, no? As long as you can see it, that's fine.
Okay, sure. I'll just
Yeah, and
show option. Just a second.
and I can tell when to change the slides.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, it's visible, right?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so then that title slide will read Future Placemaking and Belonging, Rupture, Communal Peace, and Individuality in a Selection of Post-Millennial Indian Speculative Fiction in English. This talk is based on my last book. I don't know if I'm still on camera, but if I am, I'm holding up a copy of this book, which was published by Bloomsbury last March. Actually, it's nearly a year old. And the book is called Post-Millennial Indian Speculative Fiction in English: Desi Dystopias and Ideas of Belonging. But what we're going to do today is we're going to explore notions of placemaking and belonging in post-millennial Indian speculative fiction in English. And we'll look at extracts from 4 novels, all of which have been published since 2016. If I can have the next slide, please, we can see these 4. Right, thank you. So, the 4 texts at hand, we've got Samit Basu's The Gin Bot of Shantipot from 2023, Varun Thomas Matthews' The Black Dwarfs of the Good Little Bay, which is from 2019, Vikram Balgopal Savage Blue, 2016, and Gautam Bhatia's The Sentence from 2024. And we're going to look at the extracts of these novels. I'm going to move through them one by one and think about these theories of placemaking and belonging. So I hope to show through this analysis of the extracts that the protagonist in each case has their sense of placemaking and belonging disrupted by what I'm calling a rupture. And that takes place within the narrative, the novel's narrative arc. So I'm going to suggest that the rupture results in a renewed articulation of placemaking and belonging by the protagonist, and that the outcome of this disruption does not necessarily result in a sense of renewed belonging per se. Rather, it is the telling of the struggle to placemake and to belong that is the achievement in and of itself. I assert that the characters' actions render them agents of and for future change. I will close by considering the role of speculative fiction as a site of cultural reconfiguration for the projection of new possibilities for India, whilst considering how these fictions tell of futures that we may wish to avoid, of systems we should challenge, and ideas of belonging that move beyond the domestic and the territorial. I'm hoping that's clear and audible, so I can move straight into the analysis, the paper in full. Is it fine?
Hello. Yeah, we
Is
can hear
everything
you.
fine?
Yes,
I'm
yes.
audible.
Yes, you're audible.
It's all okay?
Yes.
Can yeah. Are we, is everything okay? Am I audible? I don't know if you can see the slides. Professor Chakrabarti, ma'am, is everything fine? Can you hear me?
Everything is fine now. It's all right.
Hello, everything is fine. Please continue.
Are you able to see the slides now?
Yes, we are able to see the slide. We can see you also. So everything is
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fine, thank you so much. Okay. All right, so I'll begin by just thinking a little bit about the production of post-millennial Indian speculative fiction within a broader kind of the global trends of speculative fiction writing in English and also in translation into English. So writer Kodasco in 2021 writes how, and I quote, the early 21st century has witnessed an explosion of speculative fiction in English in translation. And she underlines, I quote, one positive result is the growing desire of Anglophone countries to move outside of their literary comfort zones and learn about how the non-Anglophone world thinks and writes about future technology, the supernatural, the uncanny, the horrifying, and the impossible, end quote. So India's place in this global trend of an upsurge in speculative fiction, interestingly both as science fiction in translation and also Anglophone speculative fiction, which is the focus of our paper today, is one that, although aligning with the genres present in these broader trends, so we might think of near future, supernatural, magic realism, horror, it treads its own path in terms of foregrounding, I suggest, narratives of placemaking and belonging. So here I want to take up this observation and in examining extracts from 4 speculative fiction texts in English produced since 2015. Back to that first slide, please, the one that shows all 4. Yeah. These are all Indian speculative fiction texts in English published since 2015 and written by Indian authors residing in India. I want to attempt to show how future visions of India or India's and Indian identities variously embody notions of placemaking and belonging. So here the extracts under consideration in this paper come from Samit Basu's The Gin Pot or Shantipot, which is 2023. Varun Thomas Matthews' The Black Dwarfs of the Good Little Bay from 2019, Vikram Balgopal's Savage Blue from 2016, and Gautam Bhatia's The Sentence from 2024. In Basu's text, we are invited to consider future identities, of which some are human, but the majority are bought. The human protagonist, Leena, lives in the divided city of Shantipot, which is run by the Tiger clan. She loves the city and does what she can to protect and celebrate it. Leena works as a tour guide and she negotiates her sense of belonging alongside the dystopian regime, its constant surveillance of citizens and its threat of imminent violence. I read her struggle to celebrate the city and its people amidst destruction and ruin as a marker of dynamism, a social belonging. And this is research according to Maher et al. From 2013. Then in Varun Thomas Matthews' The Black Dwarfs of the Good Little Bay from 2019, here Matthew toggles between the now of the 2040s and the early post-millennial years that are recalled through memories and through what he calls exhibits. These are essentially letters, legal documents, and newspaper or media. The 2040s that is depicted as the now is a near-future eco-apocalyptic Mumbai decimated by climate change and inundated by the Arabian Sea to become the Bombardrome, an immense structure that hovers above the land that Mumbai once occupied. I argue that this structure, this Bombardrome, problematizes placemaking, as it both creates and destroys individuality in the same moment through the employment of dystopian identification tech. In Balagopal's portal fantasy, Savage Blue from 2016, Akila is half Bele, half human, and she has made a pact with a character called the Sentinel that at birth to become the next Bele. Then, on his promise, she will be set free and be able to return to Earth for good. She hunts down her childhood friend, Shyam, in New Delhi, with a plan to become pregnant. Shyam falls in love with her, and he is persuaded to return to her world. Through the characters of Akila and Shyam, I focus on how we belong, in terms of spaces, and how we associate with the familiar in terms of landscapes, soundscapes, whilst also exploring a little bit about placemaking as safety. And then finally, in the sentence from 2024, Bhatia focuses on a particular place here in this novel. He calls it the city of Peruma, and the citizen and governmental forces that divide it. The protagonist is known as Guardian Neela, and she is tasked to navigate the old and the new, memories and myths, and in doing so, she grapples with questions of belonging and placemaking. She is sworn to obsessive impartiality in order to maintain peace in a troubled city. Her own belonging is challenged when a century-old case of the martyr Jagat is reopened just a short time before the cryogenic sleep state he has been put into is halted, which would obviously then lead to his death. I argue that Guardian Neela's own placemaking is shaped by the impartiality she must uphold and the truth that she is tasked to reveal. So what do we mean when we talk about placemaking and belonging? What are some of the key kind of theoretical ideas around this? Well, clearly the idea of belonging is a very contested and complex one. You know, what do we belong to? How do we belong? How and when do we demonstrate our belongingness? Likewise, how does belonging then connect to notions of placemaking? So what is this dialogue between belonging and placemaking itself? Yuval Davis from 2006 seems to suggest that belonging remains somewhat invisible until it is challenged. And she writes, I quote, belonging tends to be naturalized and becomes articulated and politicized only when it is threatened in some way. The politics of belonging comprises specific political projects aimed at constructing belonging in particular ways to particular collectivities that are, at the same time, themselves being constructed by these projects in very particular ways, end quote. I also am interested in what John Friedman, a big theorist in placemaking, says when he writes in 2010 about attachment to place. And think of this as a facet of belonging because he too recognizes the invisibility of attachment to place until some kind of event brings about a need for the attachment to be visible. He writes, attachment is subjective, invisible attribute. Invisible that it is under normal circumstances. Invisible that is under normal circumstances. It may occasionally become visible when a neighborhood is threatened with demolition or organizes, or not, to fight for its survival, or when its social composition changes rapidly and the integration of newcomers becomes stressful and problematic, end quote. So in the analysis of these novels in question, I identify that all four novels deal with some kind of rupture. That's in the title of the talk, right? I'm interested in this idea of a rupture taking place. So we've got ruptures where eruption of violence happens in a divided city. We've got apocalyptic climate devastation of a city in the Bombardment of Mumbai. We've got threat from an alien species, which happens in Savage Blue, and an act of murder or martyrdom that divides communities in the sentence. So in all of these novels, I identify some kind of rupture. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I read this notion of rupture as being indicative of place. So, and of place being specifically dynamic, in which I mean an ever-changing scape. And this, despite Tuan's 1977 assertion, so a little way back now, that place is an organized world of meaning. It is essentially a static concept. If we see the world as process constantly changing, we should not be able to develop any sense of place. Well, I think where we are now, we can challenge that 1977 assertion. Tuan has, however, argued for a sense of place being intrinsically linked with affect, and by extension, a sense of belonging. And he developed the now famous notion of topophilia in this regard. But some more recent scholarship, I'm looking at Creswell here from 2015, he writes of place and its related dynamism as being performed. And I quote, thinking of place as performed and practiced can help us think of place in radically open and non-essentialized ways, where place is constantly struggled over and reimagined in practical ways. End quote. So if then, as Creswell asserts, place is central to the remaking and the unmaking of identity, it follows that a sense of belonging is intimately entwined in such an enterprise. I suggest that the rupture present across each of these four novels in turn results in a sense of belonging being challenged. It is indicative of what Creswell writes as performance. If we think of the rupture as a provocation or maybe a threat, according to Yuval Davis that I've quoted just previously there, to which one responds. In the struggle to define such ideas of belonging and non-belonging, Maher et al. 2013 put forward five key themes of what they refer to as social belonging. And for any of you in the room who are particularly interested in this, I can just wholeheartedly recommend looking at this paper in detail. Because these authors systematically coded from a narrative literature review using the Summon database the key search term sense of belonging. And from that, they formulated five themes of belonging: subjectivity, groundedness, reciprocity, dynamism, and self-determination. Overall, their findings articulate belonging to a relationship, a group or system, historical or current event, and a place, as well as feelings of being valued and respected. Reciprocal feelings or beliefs within the group also shaped a sense of belonging, as did the feeling of acceptance or fitting in. So throughout the analysis of the novels, which we will now move to, I'm going to draw on that research of these five themes and think about how these are manifest or represented in the texts. So I want to show in my analysis now that the characters post-rupture struggle with belonging, non-belonging to a group or maybe to beliefs that another group may hold. The characters repeatedly fail. They fail to achieve a sense of belonging because of being different, which results in their non-acceptance into a group or a community. So Lena, in Basu's novel, opposes the tiger clan's supremacy as it takes over the city, and her life is put at risk because of this. In The Black Dwarfs, Matthew's Godse refuses to live within the Bombadil, existing instead on the outroads, which brings itself problems. Balagopal Shyam leaves all he knows behind on Earth to become the only full human in a series of shifting alien worlds. And in the sentence, Guardian Neela belongs to neither camp, not to the commune that believes Jagat was a martyr, or to the high town that believes he is an outright murderer. And this in-betweenness alienates her. So all four characters across these novels suffer at the hands of not being able to belong, underscoring what Allen et al. From 2021 articulate about belonging when they say, and I quote, "It is facilitated and hindered by people, things and experiences involving the social milieu, which dynamically interact with the individual's character, their experiences, culture, identity, and perceptions." I'm going to suggest, and I'll return to this in the conclusions, that the actual telling of the struggle of placemaking and belonging across these four novels is actually the achievement of all four characters, rather than the outcome of whether they successfully manage to placemake or belong or not. I suggest that all these characters call us to consider the notion of non-belonging or fettered belonging as a form of agent for and of future change. Okay, let's move to the analysis then. The next slide, please. This is an extract taken from Jinbot of Shantipur, 2023. So, in this novel, the protagonist Lena lives in the deeply divided society of Shantipur. The city is governed by the Tiger clan, tyrannical regime, where citizens are constantly under surveillance, often carried out by drones that can be as tiny as an insect. The arm of the ruling clan extends to the prowlers, who walk the streets on a mission to keep law and order. A bot, gleaning data from outside the tiger net that censors all negative descriptions of the city, describes Shantipur thus, and I quote, "A planet-wide symbol of decay." This is on the slide for you also, the first quote. "A planet-wide symbol of decay, despair, and decline, and has been described as a grand example of the human inability to evolve fast enough to save itself." End quote. Lena stops the bot as it offers to bypass local censorship and access more information about Shantipur from the rest of the world. She says, "No need." Here is this, sorry, I'll read this quote for you. "No need. We live here. We know it." This, I read Lena's statement as one which articulates a knowing based on lived experience, and therefore we understand that whatever data the bot can or cannot access, and whatever the Tiger clan chooses to censor, and relatedly what it chooses to showcase, it is actually irrelevant, given that the only way to know the city, to belong to the city, is to live in it, like Lena does. Her daily work is significantly aligned with this kind of knowing, because she works as a tour guide for Tiger Tours, a hop-on, hop-off hover bus service that takes tourists around Shantipur's central zone. And this particular connection with the city is one enacted at street level. And Friedman talks about this in his idea of, in his theories of placemaking. And he writes, "My inclination is to argue for a pedestrian scale, which allows people to interact in a variety of most unplanned ways on the street or in business establishments, among other spaces of habitual encounter. In this perspective, neighborhoods are defined from the inside out as the area that neighbors acknowledge their home, or as sociologists would say, as their primary space of reproduction." End quote. And I suggest here with this, the work of Friedman on the pedestrian scale, that his description of people interacting in unplanned ways on the street, this we can see even in Basu's novel. See here on this second quote, which I'm not going to read out, so please have a look yourselves. "Look how Lena has spent years building up a network of friends. These may be in the arc of the novel informers. And this kind of relationship that is described here, we might read as reciprocity in the sense of belonging, right? Where Lena is belonging to something, to somewhere. So this commitment to each other, as we see in this extract here, the commitment to each other almost like as a group, as well as to the city itself, suggests an interrelatedness of both belonging and placemaking. So where the two kind of come together. And later in the novel, Lena comes to directly inhabit power when she meets the Jinn bot of the title of the novel. This Jinn bot grants wishes, and this is what I read as a rupture in the novel itself. She is given 3 wishes, and Lena immediately thinks of what this opportunity could mean for the future of Shantipur. In a similar vein to the Aladdin story that many of us are familiar with, the lamps and the jinn bring about much chaos as much as opportunity. Conflict, abuse of power and agency all dominate Basu's narrative as the lamp is chased down, moving from one pair of hands to another. But once Lena gets hold of the lamp, her first wish propels her to power. But Lena is ashamed of what she has become. She says to herself, "I have violated every principle, every value I was raised with. What have I done to overcome imperialism or colonization? What have I done for democracy or bought rights? The victory you speak of was in alliance with the Tiger Clan, in league with the secret police, and at every step of the way I lied, I cheated, I stole. I found myself with world-changing alien magic and thought only of my own interests and convenience. Despite her actions, Lena does not lose hope or focus on what has been central to her existence, the communities and the city of Shantikot. Can I have the next slide, please? When she does have her second wish, she wishes to use it more wisely. And so, this is what her reflection reads. The next slide. No, the one before, please. Yeah. So we can see here in this extract, there's so much beauty in the people and the places that I would have ignored if I hadn't spent every day showing a whole other set of things to tourists. I would have hated the city, wanted only to escape it, if they hadn't made me understand how much I respected it. So I suggest that in this novel, a sense of placemaking that progresses ideas of selfhood, that risk being divorced from the larger picture of human or bought existence. Through Lena, we are invited to reflect on one's relationship with the bigger goals of society, on what really matters when we placemake. Just as Holston and Appadurai from 1996 write, citizenship concerns more than rights to participate in politics. It concerns the moral and the performative dimensions of membership that define the meanings and practices of belonging to a society. End quote. Right, let's move to the next novel. Next slide, please. The Black Dwarfs of the Good Little Bay, 2019. This is by Varun Thomas Matthew, a gem of a novel. I encourage you to get to know it if you don't know it already. So here in this novel, Mumbai has fallen to a cataclysmic climate event, and that is what I read as a rupture in this novel. Its inhabitants have been moved upwards to live in a bombardrome. This is the urban center which now actually hovers above the land, which has become now sea, of the once coastal metropolis of Bombay, Mumbai. For anyone who lives on the outside of the bombardrome, technology controls their entry and exit. And this is the case of the protagonist, Godse, because he chooses to live outside, on the edge of the Western Tar Road. And this is next to the coastal wall. Since the identification of the person wishing to enter the bombardrome can only be confirmed through their DNA, a drop of blood is necessary each time entry into the bombardrome is sought. Such a demand results, I suggest, in those who wish to belong, even temporarily, to the hovering city, being subjected to intrusive identification tech. And this act might then be read as one of Maha et al.'s comments on belonging, of the 5 themes of belonging. And I quote, individuals who feel powerless to belong as the result of physical or environmental factors may otherwise qualify for group membership, yet never successfully achieve a sense of belonging. One of the reasons for this reciprocal interaction, for limited reciprocal interactions between the inhabitants of the bombardrome and the protagonist, Godse, is because even though he has access to the space, in theory, he never really fully belongs to that place. Right? You will see on the slide, there is the next extract, which talks about a drug that when ingested, affected so specific and limited a part of the brain's limbic system that it induced a remarkably unique amnesia, one that left its victims' normal faculties untouched, but weaken their hold on the perception of history. Once this chemical was developed and perfected, it was released en masse into the bombardrome's filtration systems. You breathed it in, you let go of your nation past, and everything else went on as usual. Clearly, this is a dystopian regime, drugging residents and erasing or grossly manipulating their cells. And this, we see, forms a chasm between Godse, who lives outside of the bombardrome, and the inhabitants who live inside and who are therefore ingesting this drug. He remembers, through lived experience, a history quite different from the one the inhabitants have come to know. In this way, Godse cannot access a sense of self that emerges from one's predominant social and environmental contexts, reinforcing and challenging the subjective sense of belonging, according to Allen et al. The lack of shared history here, the manipulated sense of belonging, results, I argue, in a multifaceted Godse identity, because he simultaneously belongs to a new space, whilst knowing and belonging to an old place. Maha et al. Write, I quote, "The role played by shared histories and beliefs in cementing an individual's feeling of connection is necessary to perceiving a sense of belonging." End quote. So the bombardrome, in a way, enacts in a way of like flattening out placemaking and belonging, right? So to be clear, it's not a complete eradication of either, but both placemaking and belonging are significantly changed in order to artificially bring about communal harmony, albeit through restrictive and abusive means. So the bombardrome has different quadrants, and if we can have the next slide, please. This is an extract from where Matthew describes the religious quadrant. I'll just give you a moment to have a look at that on the screen. So here in this scene, we're really called to question what it means to belong, right, to a faith or a spirituality. The use of the Arivo text clearly raises questions around religious tolerance and notions of the secular. I suggest this problematizes reciprocity of belonging, because if reciprocity of belonging is mobilized through connectedness, shared by the individual and the external referent, then this moment described here in the religious quadrant significantly recalibrates the idea of what it means to be shared. This scene describes in such a way that we are unable to see who is sharing and what is being shared in terms of group interaction and demonstrations of belonging. Given that everybody is wearing the tech, the Aribo headset, there is no communion between those individuals sharing the faith, Muslim to Muslim, Christian to Christian, never mind across the faiths, all of whom are worshipping in the same space, described here as a compound. I suggest that the tech reduces the interaction to such a base level that reciprocity of belonging is almost eradicated. We imagine a few polite words might be exchanged as the worshippers leave the compound following namaz or other forms of worship, but otherwise interaction is absolutely minimal. Matthew writes that this particular organization of religious practice is enforced so, and I quote, that the coexistence of all faiths is guaranteed. Here he suggests maybe that a greater sense of belonging might be achieved if we all live happily ever after. This idea opposes what Creswell advocates when he writes, and I quote, "Place is the raw material for the creative production of identity rather than a priori label of identity. Place provides the conditions of possibility for creative social practice." End quote. Okay, the next novel is Savage Blue.
Ma'am,
Can I just take a time check? I'm halfway
excuse
through.
me, can I
Are
interrupt
we
you?
fine, ma'am?
There are
Still,
5
or
minutes
I can
left,
shorten
please.
it a little bit if you wish.
There are 5 minutes left, okay? Hello, ma'am, there's 5 minutes left. 5
Okay,
more
so
minutes.
then I can move to the conclusions. Okay, so apologies. If we can move to the final slide, which shows the 4 novels again. In 5 minutes, there's no way I can move through the other 2 texts. I thought I had a little longer, so forgive me for trying to do too much. So I'll not be able to comment on Savage Blue or the sentence, but I'll try and just give you a quick conclusions here. So, the analysis of the extracts has attempted to show that the protagonist in each case has their sense of placemaking, belonging, disrupted somewhat by an act which I have called rupture. For Lena, we know it is the arrival of the Jinbot and the opportunity for life-changing wishes. In the Black Dwarfs, it's the relocation of the city of Bombay to the Bombadroom, a highly monitored and controlled city. In Shyam, in Balagopal Savage Blue, it is the protagonists move away from Earth to live with Akila. And in Bhattia's The Sentence, Guardian Neela is asked to represent Jagat the Martyr in court, which challenges her own sense of belonging to the divided city. So my choice to consider the notions of placemaking and belonging in these selection of texts lies in the observation that this genre of Indian fiction in English is engaged in cultural reconfigurations of what it means to belong to India, or indeed how one might demonstrate a belonging to India through ideas of Indianness. By focusing on future visions, speculative narratives of what it might mean to placemake and belong in near future or hyper or fantastical future India, I suggest that we are able to discern a motif of non-belonging or fetid belonging that works dynamically as an agent for change. Moreover, I posit that these fictions tell of futures that we may wish to avoid, of systems that we should maybe challenge, and ideas of belonging that move beyond the domestic and the territorial. Whether we read these texts as warnings, as dark prophecies of a post-capitalist world, or as a call to mobilize and react urgently to climate catastrophe, we should certainly read and celebrate these novels as exciting, innovative literary works from a very contemporary India. Thank you.
Hello. Is it working? Hello. Thank you, Professor Varughese, for a very thought-provoking lecture. Professor Varughese has been exploring the whole concept of placemaking and belonging with the help of 4 very recently published Indian English speculative fiction that she has chosen for her paper. And she has particularly focused on the idea of rupture or disruption to understand the interrelation between the concept of placemaking and belonging. And she thinks that there is a dialogue between the two, which she has attempted to explore and understand. Thank you for your attempt and for this wonderful paper. I would like to ask you a question. How do you see, you have been emphasizing the constructedness of place, then how do you see the relation between place and space here?
Yeah, so there is a lot of there's a lot of research that sits in the across sociological studies and human geography, which kind of unpicks these two, right? And I, for this paper, I have certainly been leaning into the somewhere that captures the two, right? Where Friedman talks about space And for those of you in the room who are particularly interested in this, I really suggest you start with Friedman, because he really looks at how we can identify a space, we can identify the boundaries of a physical space where we live or where we commute to or where we work or where we spend our leisure time. And yet, when we move from space to place, we think then about placemaking. And at least for my reading, I'm interested in how that placemaking can also intersect with belonging. So we can frequent a place and we can frequent it for years. But the question is, does it become a place for us? Is it somewhere where we feel we can, in my readings at least, belong? Is it somewhere where we feel that we have a connection of reciprocity, of dynamism, of groundedness, according to the five themes identified in the literature around belonging? Does the space become a place for an individual through these mechanisms of belonging?
Thank you. Can we open the session now to more questions and suggestions? Are there questions?
Hello, ma'am. Hello.
Hi. Hello. Tell me.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Fernando. I'm particularly now working on Indian dystopian fiction, so to say. And I have read your book on post-millennial fiction, speculative fiction, this dystopia, that where you have talked about belonging and placemaking. Yes, that very book. Yeah, so I've been reading this a lot. It's helping me. I was just thinking, because I was reading and you have particularly talked about placemaking and belonging, and here you have also talked about that. I am particularly concerned about the idea of othering, because when we think of placemaking and belonging, the other side is directly othering that we often see in real life as well when it comes to Indian society, particularly if we read other like subaltern literature and all that. There we have a like real life representation of that. So because you talk about and you have written, you have researched so much on particularly placemaking and belonging, how do you look at this aspect of othering when it comes to speculative fiction or dystopian fiction, so to say? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you for reading my work, first of all, and for engaging with it. I'm grateful. Thank you. Great question. So othering kind of happens at many levels here, right? So speculative fiction, as we know, works generally on the idea of a novum. If we think about Suvin, Darko, and the idea of estrangement and cognition, there's an othering that takes place even at that level, theoretically, within the genre itself, right? So we move from something that is familiar, it's usually real world. So, for example, if we think about what I've said in Matthew's novel, the idea of climate catastrophe or climate apocalypse is a kind of real world, sometimes event in some ways, and worry or concern for us in this moment. So it is real for us, and yet then what he does with it, he others it in the way that he estranges it. So the movement from cognition to estrangement, the defamiliarization that happens within the genre of speculative fiction in different ways, myriad ways, but it's always there, this idea of a hook into what we know, and then a twisting and a changing, and something happens, it gets othered, right? In a way that it then becomes less familiar or defamiliar. So within the genre itself, I would say there's one level of kind of othering that happens. And the author kind of holds our hand and pulls us through that othering so that we stick with it. That if it's too other, then we don't stay with it. And we can't, it is too weird, it is too strange that we can't stick with the othering. But of course, since you also are working on dystopian fiction, we know that dystopia when it sits on the flip side of utopia, we know that that slippage is very quick. We can move from a supposedly utopian space to a dystopian space very, very quickly. If we think about Sultana's Dream, one of the very early short fictions on a speculative notion of a female-centric or female-centered space come place, then in that the others become, or the othered are the men. They are the ones who get locked up and let out into Ladyland only when the women and those in charge allow for such a thing to happen. So the othering can happen to whoever or whatever the author designs. But in the real world, of course, we're looking at echoes of marginalized communities, marginalized people, and also people who have become marginalized because of systems. We know that in dystopian studies, we also pay a lot of attention to how one's life moves from a baseline sense of precarity. We all live a precarious life. We live now, we could be dead tomorrow. We have no hand in it, it happens. But our levels of precariousness, right, are then elevated through systems, doctrines, organizations, which render the human life more precarious. In that sense, there are groups of people, marginalized groups of people, for many, many reasons, who become then those who face that elevated sense of precariousness. And I would argue that is also another manifestation of othering. Right? So systems, organizations, institutions that make a group of people, for whatever reason, elevated in their precariousness, and therefore risk injury, death, further marginalization because of the top-down system. So that also for me is another form of othering.
Are there any question? Is there any more question? Any other question or suggestion or comment? I don't think we have any more questions. So thank you very much for your wonderful lecture. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Varugis, for that insightful and enriching plenary address. And we will going to move forward to the closing segment of the day one of this international conference. For the formal closing remarks, I would like to invite Mr. Shornendu Dam on stage, who is happened to be the convener of the conference. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, RB. Now, I'm not very good with the microphone, so I will keep it very short. Thank you to my professors from West Bengal State University, Professor Shipra Mukherjee, Professor Chandrabhaya Chakraborty, Dr. Snehakar Chaudhuri, for their help and for being here today. I would like to thank my team from Postcolonial Interventions, particularly Obinda Mudhurimadi and Samritadi, for coming today, being here for the entire day. Of course, thank you to my colleagues, the research scholars of our department, and of course the students who have worked tirelessly as the volunteers. Thanks to our Dean Sir, Assistant Dean Ma'am, and HOD Ma'am for their guidance. A huge round of applause for, of course, the participants for the new insights in the domain of Indian writing in English. We are only halfway through. It's only day one, so it's concluding the day one. We are only halfway through. Tomorrow we have 3 exciting plenary lectures and 6 parallel academic sessions. I hope that tomorrow becomes as engaging as today, if not more. Tomorrow registration begins sharp at 9 a.m. and our first plenary session will begin at 10 a.m. So see you all tomorrow, and we have arranged some tea outside, okay, at the same place like the morning. So please grab some tea and enjoy. Thank you.